The lonely watcher, the sun hung low over the dusty alien village, painting the cracked buildings in shades of orange and gold. Children's laughter filled the air, echoing between the uneven walls. A group of alien children ran across the small field, chasing a bright red ball. Their clawed feet kicked up clouds of dust as they darted back and forth, calling to each other in excited voices on the far edge of the field. Half in shadow sat Lyra. She was small for her age, thin, with pale purple skin and short silver hair that caught the light. Her eyes, large and green, followed every movement of the ball. But her body stayed still. One leg dangled from the broken bench she sat on. The other was gone, ending just above the knee. The children pretended not to notice her, but she could feel their eyes sometimes. A quick glance, a whisper, then laughter that was not friendly. They called her names when they thought she could not hear. Broken, useless, half-girl, Lyra's. Hands clutched a bent piece of scrap metal she had found days ago. It was shaped almost like a toy sword. She liked to hold it. Not because she wanted to play with the others, but because it made her feel less empty. A loud kick sent the red ball rolling toward her. It stopped only a few feet away. One of the children ran after it, a tall boy with sharp, curved horns. He reached the ball, but instead of asking Lyra to pass it, he grabbed it quickly and muttered, "Don't touch it," as if she might break it by looking. Then he ran back to the others without waiting for a reply. Lyra's gaze dropped to the ground. Her chest ached in that way it always did. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she was used to it. But deep inside, there was a part of her that wanted to run after them. To kick that ball and hear someone shout her name with joy. From the far side of the field, a stranger was watching. He leaned against a metal post, arms crossed. His clothes were not like the villagers' loose wraps. He wore a dark jacket with patches on the sleeves and heavy boots. His skin was a warm brown, his hair short and messy. His eyes were sharp but calm. This was Jack, a human engineer who had arrived in the village only a few days ago. He had come to repair the broken water pumps, but now his attention was fixed on the quiet girl sitting apart from the others. He had noticed her before, not just the missing leg, but the way she sat perfectly still, her back straight, her eyes following the game like a hawk. There was no self-pity in her face, only something else, something harder. When the game ended, the children scattered, their voices fading into the streets. Lyra stayed where she was, watching the dust settle. Jack walked toward her. His boots crunched softly on the dry ground. Lyra's eyes flicked to him, then away. She didn't like strangers getting close. "You? Don't play with them?" Jack asked. His voice was calm, almost casual. Lyra didn't answer. She stared at the scrap metal in her hands. "I saw the way you were watching the game," Jack said. "You're good at reading it, aren't you? You know where the ball will go before they do?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't sure if he was mocking her. "I'm not here to make fun of you," Jack continued. "I just think you should be out there, not stuck on this bench." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't run," she said finally. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "I don't have a leg, and no one cares to give me one." Jack looked at her prosthetic stump. It was wrapped in old cloth that had clearly been repaired many times. He frowned, not out of pity, but because he could see it didn't have to be this way. "I'm a mechanic," he said. "I've built machines that can walk, climb, even jump. Building you a leg isn't impossible." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "You fix machines. Not people, maybe," Jack said. "But maybe you're not just a person. Maybe you're stronger than all of them." Lyra finally looked at him. Her green eyes studied his face as if trying to find the trick behind his words. No one had ever said something like that to her. Jack stood up straight. "I'll see you around," he said. Then started to walk away. Lyra watched him go. Her fingers tightened around the scrap metal sword. Her heart was beating a little faster. and she didn't know why. As the sun dipped lower and the shadows stretched across the empty field, she found herself wondering if the human meant what he said, or if he would be like everyone else, someone who noticed her once and then forgot. But deep inside, in a place she had almost forgotten, a small spark of hope flickered to life. The offer the next day, the field was empty. The dust had settled into thin cracks on the ground, and the red ball lay forgotten near the wall. Lyra sat on the same broken bench, the same place she always did. The morning wind carried the smell of baked bread from the village, mixed with the faint scent of oil and metal. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him. She told herself she didn't care if she never saw the human again. But her eyes kept flicking toward the narrow street on the far side, where he had disappeared yesterday. Then, the sound of heavy boots crunching on dry earth. Jack appeared, carrying a small canvas bag slung over his shoulder. His jacket was open now, revealing a faded shirt with burn marks. The kind of marks only someone who worked with welding torches and machinery would have. Lyra's eyes darted to the bag, then back to the ground. "You're here early," Jack said, stopping in front of the bench. "I'm always here," she replied flatly. He sat down beside her. It's close enough for her to notice the faint scent of engine grease and something sharper, maybe soldering smoke. He opened the canvas bag and pulled out a few small metal rods, wires, and a sleek-looking gear that caught the morning light. "I started working on something," he said, holding up the gear. "It's part of a joint mechanism, one that could fit you." Lyra's lips tightened. "I told you, it's not possible." Jack leaned back. "Possible just means no one has tried hard enough." She turned to him sharply. "You don't understand. Human prosthetics don't work for my kind. Our nervous systems are different. We need a BioLink core. They're rare, expensive, and only healers in the capital can install them. Do you have a ship to take me there? You have credits for that core?" Jack's jaw tightened for a moment. "No," he admitted, "but I can make one." Her laugh was bitter. "You think you can just make something people have spent decades failing to build?" "I think," Jack said slowly, "that most people stop when it gets hard. I don't." Something in the way he said it made her heart thump, but she shook her head. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you even bother? I'm nothing to you." Jack studied her face. "Because I know what it's like to be on the sidelines, watching everyone else live," he said quietly. "And I know what it's like when someone finally gives you a chance." For a moment, Lyra didn't move. She just stared at him, her green eyes flickering with something unreadable. Jack stood and began walking toward the street. "I'll be at the junkyard outside the village," he said over his shoulder. "If you want to see what impossible looks like, come by." He didn't look back, but if he had, he might have seen her hands clutching the scrap metal sword a little tighter. The junkyard was a graveyard of machines. Half-buried robot arms jutted from the dirt. Rusted engine cores lay scattered like bones, and piles of twisted metal were stacked high. Jack moved through it like he had been born there. His hands were fast and precise, pulling apart old parts, inspecting them, tossing some aside, keeping others. His mind was a map of connections and possibilities. By midday, the sound of soft steps approached from behind. He didn't turn. "Took you long enough," he said. Lyra stood a few feet away, her arms crossed. "I'm not here to help," she said. "I just wanted to see if you were serious." Jack grinned. "I'm always serious." He tossed her a thin silver rod. "Hold that." She caught it awkwardly. "What is this?" "Spinal connector." Jack said, "If I can tune it to your nerve pattern, it'll act like a BioLink." She frowned. "That's not how it works." "It's not how it's supposed to work," Jack corrected. "But I'm not supposed to be here either. Yet here I am." Hours passed. The sun dipping lower. Jack worked without pause. Measuring, cutting, welding. He explained some things to her. Not because he thought she'd understand, but because he liked talking while he worked. To his surprise, she asked questions. Sharp ones when she pointed out that one of his circuit lines would overload under stress. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You've worked with machines before?" "My father was a miner," she said quietly. "He used to fix our equipment before the collapse." Jack didn't push for more, but he filed that away as the light faded. Jack set down a half-assembled leg. It was rough, made of mismatched parts, but the joint system moved smoothly. Lyra stared at it longer than she meant to. "It's ugly," she said at last. Jack laughed. "So am I. Doesn't mean I can't run for the first time." A small smile ghosted across her face. So quick she probably didn't even know it happened. When Jack began packing up, Lyra stayed a moment longer. Looking at the half-finished leg, "Even if you finish it," she said slowly, "it doesn't mean it will work." Jack looked at her. "True, but it does mean I'll have tried." She swallowed, feeling that small spark from yesterday grow warmer. "You're stubborn," she muttered. "Best compliment I've had all week," Jack said. As he slung the canvas bag over his shoulder, the wind picked up, carrying the sound of distant children laughing and kicking that same red ball, Lyra's. Gaze shifted toward the noise, then back to Jack. "Fine," she said at last. "If you're going to be stupid about this, I'll help." Jack's smile was slow but sure. "Welcome to the team." And just like that, the lonely watcher had taken her first step toward the field, even if it was still only in her mind. Building Hope. The morning air was sharp and cool, carrying with it the faint hum of machinery from the mining sector on the far side of the village. Jack was already awake, his sleeves rolled up, grease staining his arms. In front of him lay a messy work table inside a half-collapsed storage shed he had turned into a workshop. On one side, parts scavenged from the junkyard were neatly sorted. Gears, bolts, flexible joint rods on the other. Scraps of alien tech sat in uneven piles. Circuit boards etched with curling alien symbols. Pieces of synthetic muscle fibers used in industrial loaders. The centerpiece was the half-built prosthetic leg. It stood upright on the table. Skeletal but sturdy, the exposed joint rotated smoothly when Jack tested it. But the BioLink core was still missing the heart of the whole design. He didn't hear her enter, but he knew she was there. Lyra moved quietly, leaning against the doorframe, her single leg supporting her without effort but with that slight, uneven sway she hated. "You're here early," Jack said without looking up. "You said if I was going to help, I should show up before midday." She replied. Her voice was flat, but there was no bite in it. Jack grinned. "Good memory." He pushed a small metal disc toward her. "That's a neuroreceptor plate. I need you to etch the nerve paths on it. Thin, precise lines. Like you're drawing the veins of a leaf." She raised an eyebrow. "And how am I supposed to know your human nerve pattern codes?" "You're not," Jack said. "You're going to teach me yours. We'll mix both until the signal runs clean." It was strange, sitting together at the table, their heads bent over the same piece of metal. Lyra's clawed fingers moved with surprising delicacy, scraping fine lines into the disc while Jack adjusted tiny components. He explained each tool he used, and she listened, sometimes asking questions. The hours passed in a rhythm. The workshop filled with the faint whir of his portable drill and the crackle of welding arcs. Occasionally, a gust of wind carried children's laughter from the field outside. Lyra's eyes would flick toward the sound, but she didn't stop. Working later that afternoon, Jack suggested they take a walk to find a part he needed, an energy stabilizer. The nearest place to find one was the old industrial zone. Half buried after the last quake, the ground there was uneven, cracked, and littered with twisted beams. Lyra followed slowly, her crutch clicking against the stone. Jack slowed his pace without making it obvious. They reached a collapsed storage bay. Inside, rusted exosuit frames leaned against the walls. Some still had parts intact. Jack pointed at one with a faint smile. These old loaders use power stabilizers that are perfect for our build. He pulled one free, but the movement sent a rain of dust and loose metal down. A heavy beam shifted. Above them, groaning dangerously without thinking, Jack shoved Lyra back toward the doorway. The beam crashed down where she had been standing seconds before, the noise echoing through the empty bay. She stared at him, wide-eyed. You could have been crushed. Jack shrugged, brushing dust from his jacket. Wouldn't be the first time. They didn't speak much on the way back, but Lyra kept glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Something about the way he'd moved without hesitation lodged in her mind. Back at the workshop, they installed the stabilizer. The prosthetic leg now had a full skeletal frame. Cables running like tendons, the beginnings of synthetic muscle attached at key points. Lyra ran her fingers over the metal, almost unconsciously. It's not as ugly as before, she murmured. Jack chuckled. Careful, you almost sounded impressed. She gave him a sideways glare, but didn't pull her hand away. They worked until the light outside dimmed to deep blue. Jack lit a lantern. The glow pooling across the table, he slid a fresh sheet of metal toward her. I want you to help design the armor plates. It's going to be your leg, so it should look how you want. Lyra hesitated. Staring at the blank metal, no one had ever asked her what she wanted. They either pitied her or ignored her. Slowly, she began to etch patterns, sharp curves that resembled the markings on her people's ceremonial armor. Jack watched without interrupting, filing away the details. She was claiming the leg as her own before it was even finished. That night, after Lyra left, Jack stayed in the workshop. He traced the patterns she had drawn. Thinking about the way her eyes had lit up when she worked on them, he knew the biolink was still a problem if they couldn't get it working. The leg would be little more than decoration, but he also knew something else now. This wasn't just about building a prosthetic. It was about giving her back a piece of herself. The next morning, when Lyra arrived, Jack was already waiting. We've got a problem, he said. We need a specific microcore to stabilize the biolink. And the only place to find one is the trader's yard on the East Ridge. She frowned. That's half a day's walk. And it's guarded. Outsiders aren't welcome there. Jack smiled faintly. Good thing I'm bad at following rules. Lyra's chest tightened, part fear, part excitement. And if we get caught, then we run, he said simply. Or in your case, I carry you. For a moment, she almost smiled. Outside, the sun was rising over the village, the field already filling with the sounds of children playing ball. Lyra's eyes lingered on them just a moment longer than usual. Then she turned toward Jack. Fine, she said. Let's get your microcore. And without realizing it, she had already stopped calling it his project. It was theirs now. The Sabotaged, the East Ridge was quiet in the early morning, the kind of quiet that made even the wind seem cautious. The trader's yard lay beyond a row of leaning metal gates, each covered in layers of peeling paint and alien graffiti. Jack and Lyra kept to the shadows, moving along the outer wall until they found a gap wide enough to slip through inside. The yard was a chaotic maze of stacked crates, half-dismantled speeders, and stalls filled with scavenged tech. The air smelled of oil, rust, and the faint sweetness of alien spice powder drifting from a nearby merchant stand. Jack scanned the rows quickly. We're looking for something small, silver casing, a taste in heavy for its size. He whispered. Lyra moved beside him, her eyes sharper than his in the dim light. She spotted the microcore in the back of a stall, half buried under scrap wires. The merchant, a wiry alien with pale blue scales, was arguing with another customer and didn't notice her. Jack slipped in, dropped a few small coins on the counter, and took the core before the merchant even realized what had happened. They walked away fast, not quite running, but not strolling either, Only when they reached the ridge path again did Lyra glance at the device in Jack's hand. "That's it?" she asked. "That's it," he replied. "Now we can finish your leg by midday." They were back in the workshop. The prosthetic stood on the table, complete except for the core. Jack slid it into the central housing, twisting it until it's locked into place. A soft hum filled the air, the cables in the leg flexing slightly like they were waking up. Lyra stared at it, her claws gripping the edge of the table. For the first time, she let herself imagine walking on it, running, even kicking the red ball. But while they worked, someone else had been watching across the village. In a dim back room of the water distribution hall, a man named Karvik sat hunched over a cup of bitter brew. He was one of the village's resource officers, and one of the few who benefited from keeping Lyra in the shadows. Her mother had died, owing him a large debt. And as long as Lyra was weak, he could control what little she had left. Word had spread that the human was building something for her. Karvik didn't like that, not because he cared about her, but because a girl who could walk and work might stop being dependent on him. So he decided to end it. That night, Jack stayed late in the workshop, tightening the last bolts. Lyra had left an hour earlier, after a long day of wiring and testing. The air was still warm from the day's heat, the lantern casting long shadows over the walls. Outside, footsteps approached. Slow and deliberate, a shadow passed by the half-broken window. Jack didn't notice, bent over his tools. A hand reached in through the gap. Pulling the latch on the side door, the hinges groaned, but the sound was swallowed by the crackle of the welding arc Jack was using. The intruder moved fast, knocking over a box of gears to distract him. Jack turned, and in that split second, the man grabbed the prosthetic leg from the table, swung it hard against the wall. The metal screamed as joints snapped, gears scattering across the floor. Jack lunged forward, but the man shoved him back. With a shoulder, Jack stumbled, hitting the edge of the workbench. By the time he got up, the intruder was gone, leaving behind only the twisted remains of weeks of work. Jack stood in the wreckage, his chest rising and falling. His hands clenched at his sides, but his face was strangely calm. The next morning, Lyra found him there. She froze in the doorway, eyes darting to the ruined pieces on the floor. The breath caught in her throat. "They broke it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack looked up from where he was sorting the scattered gears. "Yeah," he said simply. Her hands tightened on the crutch. "So, it's over," she said, turning to leave. "Over." Jack's voice cut through the air like a spark. "Lyra, this is just a setback." She turned back, eyes sharp. "A setback. That was the only chance I had." Jack stepped toward her, his voice low but steady. "I told you before, I don't stop when it gets hard." Something in his tone made her pause. She remembered the storm when she had seen him working late in the rain, the way he had pushed her out of the falling beam in the industrial bay. He meant it. Every word. "What if they do it again?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Then we build it again," Jack said, "and better this time." The next hours were different. Lyra didn't just watch, she worked beside him. Her hands were steady as she cut new plates from scrap metal, her claws scraping the edges smooth. Jack showed her how to reinforce the joint housing so it couldn't be snapped the same way. They salvaged every piece that could be reused and replaced the rest. The new design was heavier, stronger. The armor plates bore the same ceremonial patterns she had drawn before. But this time, Jack etched them deeper, making them harder too. Damaged as night fell, they stood over the rebuilt frame, still missing a few final components, but already stronger than before. "This isn't just a leg anymore," Jack said. "It's a message." Lyra tilted her head. "To who?" "To anyone who thinks they can keep you on the sidelines," Jack replied, for the first time in years. Lyra felt something close to defiance in her chest, not just against the other children or Karvik, but against the life she'd been forced into. She didn't know it yet. But the sabotage had done more than try to break her. It had pushed her to fight, and this time, she wasn't fighting alone. The final test, the rebuilt leg, stood on the workbench like a silent challenge. Every curve of its armor plates shone under the glow of the lantern, the ceremonial patterns etched deep into the metal. Cables ran neatly through reinforced joints, and the microcore sat at its heart. Humming faintly like a heartbeat, it was ready, or so Jack thought. "This is the last time we test it before you wear it," he said, leaning back on his stool. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Lyra stood a few steps away, her crutch under one arm. Her eyes weren't on the leg, but on the window. Outside, voices rose in excitement. The thud of the red ball bouncing against the dirt. The shouts of children calling to one another. It was the same sound she'd heard every day, but today it felt different. Jack followed her gaze. "They're playing again," he said, "and you're going to join them." Her head snapped toward him. "What?" He smiled faintly. "That's the final test, the game." Lyra's jaw tightened in front of them. In front of everyone. "Exactly," Jack said. "If you can run out there, play, and kick that ball, you won't just be walking, you'll be living again." She hesitated, her claws tapping lightly on the wooden handle of her crutch. "And if it fails? If I fall?" "Then we fix it," Jack said simply, "like we always do." The village's central field was already crowded by late afternoon. The sun hung low, turning the dust in the air into a golden haze. Adults gathered near the edges, talking in low voices. Children ran barefoot across the field, chasing the red ball in bursts of wild laughter. Jack walked beside Lyra as they crossed the open space toward the far bench. The prosthetic was strapped to her side, still hidden beneath a cloth wrap. People stared not at him, but at her, some with curiosity, others with open disbelief. Karvik was among them, leaning against a post with a smug expression. His arms crossed as if already certain of how this would end. Jack ignored him, guiding Lyra to a quiet corner of the field. He knelt beside her, unwrapping the cloth to reveal the gleaming leg. The hum of the microcore was barely audible over the noise of the crowd. "You ready?" Jack asked. Lyra's throat felt dry, but she nodded. "Let's do it." Jack lifted the leg. Fitting it over the stump of her thigh, the locking mechanism clicked into place. He adjusted the straps, checked the neural connector on the inside, and tapped the core lightly. "Stand when you feel the pulse," he said. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a faint vibration, steady and strong, running from the base of the leg into her body. Her muscles tensed instinctively. Lyra gripped Jack's arm and pushed herself up. Her weight shifted, the joint flexed, and the ground felt different, solid in a way she hadn't felt in years. The crowd went quiet. A few murmurs rose, but no one moved. "Take a step," Jack whispered. Her first step was shaky, her claws digging into his sleeve. The second was smoother. The third. On her own, gasps rippled through the crowd. Children froze mid-game, the red ball rolling to a stop near her feet. Jack bent, picked up the ball, and rolled it toward her. "Your move," he said. Lyra stared at it, her mind a whirlwind. Every day she had watched it from the bench. Every day she had wished she could be part of the game. And now it was at her feet. She took a deep breath, shifted her weight, and kicked. The ball shot across the field, spinning fast for a heartbeat. There was silence, then cheers erupted. The children ran after the ball, laughing, calling for her to join. But before she could take another step, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Karvik, standing at the edge of the crowd, his expression hard, he muttered something to the man beside him, and the two slipped away toward the far side of the field. Jack noticed too, his jaw tightening, but he didn't move. This was Lyra's moment, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it away. The game started again, this time with Lyra in the middle of it. At first, her movements were careful, but soon she was running, really running, the prosthetic moving as smoothly as if it had always been part of her. She passed the ball, chased it down, even blocked a shot from the tall boy with the curved horns. The crowd's cheers grew louder with each move. On the sidelines, Jack leaned against the bench, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at his lips. He had seen many machines work well before, but never one that changed the way people looked at someone. When the game ended, Lyra was standing in the center of the field, her chest heaving, her face was flushed, her green eyes bright. She hadn't just played, she had won. Scoring the final point, the children gathered around her, tugging at her hands. Calling for her to play again tomorrow, she looked toward the bench where Jack stood. For a moment, their eyes met, and without words, she told him what he had done for her was more than fixing a broken limb. He had pulled her out of the shadows. As the crowd began to scatter, Jack saw Karvik watching from the far corner, his face unreadable. Jack knew this wasn't over. The man wouldn't give up control so easily. But for tonight, it didn't matter. Tonight, her had stepped onto the field, and she wasn't leaving it again. The first step the night after the game, the village was quieter than usual. Most nights, the tavern at the center buzzed with voices. But tonight, the talk had moved to doorsteps and small firesides, word of what had happened on the field. Of Lyra running, kicking, and scoring the winning point had spread faster than wildfire. Lyra sat in her small room, the glow of the lantern casting warm light across the walls. The prosthetic leg rested against the side of her bed, the polished armor still holding faint dust from the field. She ran her claws along the etched ceremonial patterns, her chest tight with something she didn't know how to name. For years, she had watched the game from a distance, telling herself she didn't care. Now she had been in the center of it. The feeling hadn't left her, the rush of movement, the way the other children had looked at her without pity. The cheers echoing in her ears. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she called. Jack stepped inside, ducking under the low doorway. He carried a cloth bag in one hand, setting it on the table. "Thought you might be hungry," he said. Pulling out warm bread and a small jar of sweet paste, she took the bread without a word, but her eyes lingered on him. "You stayed on the sidelines," she said finally. "Why?" Jack smirked. "It was your game, not mine." Lyra frowned. "You built the leg. You got me there. I just opened the door," Jack replied. "You're the one who walked through it." For a while, they ate in silence. The bread was soft, the paste sweet in a way she rarely tasted. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of distant laughter from the streets. The next morning, the prosthetic was back on her leg. Jack had made adjustments to tighten the joint, saying he wanted to tune it after its first real test. They walked through the market together, Lyra still getting used to moving without the crutch. The people they passed looked at her differently now, some with smiles, some with surprise, a few still with that edge of doubt. But no one called her broken. No one whispered useless. Halfway through the market, a group of children spotted her. "Lyra, come play," they shouted, waving her over. She froze for a moment. Glancing at Jack, he gave a small nod. "Go on." She stepped forward slowly at first, then broke into a run. The ball was already rolling toward her, and she met it with a strong kick. Her laughter rose into the air. Unplanned and unforced, Jack stayed back, leaning against a wall, watching her dart and weave through the other children. The leg moved perfectly, but more importantly, she moved perfectly. The hesitation was gone, replaced with instinct. For a few minutes, it felt like nothing could break this. That illusion ended when Jack spotted Karvik at the edge of the crowd. His arms were crossed, his narrow eyes fixed on Lyra, and the faint curl of a smirk tugged at his lips. Jack didn't like it, not one bit. When the game paused, Jack motioned for Lyra to join him. "We've got to be careful," he said. In a low voice, "Not everyone's happy about your new leg." Her face hardened. "You mean Karvik?" Jack nodded. "I don't think he's done trying to control you." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Then he'll find I'm harder to control now." That evening, Jack invited her to the workshop again. "We're going to give the leg something extra," he said, spreading out a set of tools. "Extra?" she asked. "A manual override," Jack explained. "If anyone tries to tamper with it, they'll still be able to move. It's like a backup brain for the leg." Lyra sat at the table, watching him work. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked quietly. "You could leave any time, take a better job somewhere else." Jack didn't look up. "'Cause I know what it's like to be left behind," he said. "And because I believe you can do more than just walk." She tilted her head. "Like what?" "Like lead," he replied simply. The idea startled her, but she didn't argue. By the time the stars came out, the override was installed. Jack handed her a small, coin-sized button hidden inside the leg's panel. "If anything feels wrong, press this," he said. "It'll keep you moving." She touched the button lightly, feeling the faint click under her claw. "You really think someone would try to stop me again?" Jack met her gaze. "I know they will." Her green eyes glinted in the lantern light. "Then they'll regret it." The next morning, Lyra woke early and strapped on the leg herself for the first time. The process felt natural now, the straps pulling snug, the faint hum of the microcore greeting her like an old friend. She stepped outside into the cool dawn air. And instead of heading to the bench by the field, she walked straight onto the empty playing ground. She stood in the center, breathing in the stillness. The red ball lay near the far side. She walked toward it slowly, then broke into a run. Her foot connected with the ball, sending it sailing into the fence with a satisfying thud. It was her first step into something bigger than just a game, and somewhere, watching from the shadows, Karvik narrowed his eyes. Already planning his next move, the new game the morning was alive with movement. Sunlight spilled over the rooftops, turning the dust in the air into a golden shimmer. The field, once a place Lyra avoided, was now where she walked with her head high. The children were already gathered, the red ball bouncing from one to another as they waited for her. Jack stood off to the side, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He had seen her take her first steps, her first run, her first goal. But today felt different. Today wasn't a test. Today was hers. Lyra jogged across the field, the prosthetic leg moving in perfect rhythm with her other. The ceremonial patterns on the armor caught the sun, gleaming as if proud of their purpose. A few of the younger children ran up to her, tugging her hand. "You're on my team." One shouted, "No, my team." Another argued. She laughed, an unguarded, genuine sound that made Jack's smile widen. He remembered the girl who had once sat silent on the bench, clutching a scrap of metal like a shield. Now she stood in the center of the field, holding the attention of everyone there. The game began with a sharp kick. The red ball soared across the dirt. Lyra sprinted after it, her stride confident. She stole the ball from the tall boy with the curved horns, spun, and passed it to a younger player who scored the first point. The crowd, a mix of children and adults, erupted in cheers from the edge of the field. Jack caught sight of movement. Karvik was there, leaning against a post, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. His eyes followed Lyra with a sharpness that made Jack's muscles tense. But Karvik didn't move closer. He only watched, as if taking the measure of something he couldn't quite control anymore. Midway through the game, the ball rolled out toward the fence. Lyra chased after it, her pace steady. When she reached it, she noticed the youngest child in the group struggling to keep up. She slowed, passed the ball to them, and jogged alongside, guiding their movements until they kicked it back into play. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. She was part of something now, and she was making sure no one got left behind. Jack noticed, his chest tightening with quiet pride. She wasn't just playing the game, she was shaping it. When the match ended, the score was tied. The children gathered in a circle, breathing hard. Faces flushed with excitement, Lyra stood among them. One arm draped over the shoulder of a younger teammate. Her prosthetic leg was streaked with dirt. The ceremonial patterns dulled but still visible. Jack stepped forward, clapping his hands. "All right," he called. "You've all got energy left, so let's make it interesting. One last round." Adults against kids, the children erupted in cheers. Lyra's eyes went wide. "You're playing?" she asked. Jack grinned. "You didn't think I built all this just to watch forever, did you?" The adults consisted of Jack, a couple of older teens, and one laughing merchant who claimed he hadn't played in years. The kids huddled quickly. Deciding positions, Lyra ended up in the center. The heart of their formation, the game began again, faster and rougher than before. Jack went easy on the younger kids, but didn't hold back against Lyra, testing her speed and balance. She matched him step for step, the prosthetics movements flawless, even under pressure. They traded the ball back and forth, grinning like rivals who understood each other. Then, in the final moments, Lyra faked left, darted right, and sent the ball flying past Jack's foot into the goal. The field exploded in cheers. Children swarmed her, shouting her name. Lifting the red ball above their heads, Jack laughed, raising his hands in surrender when the crowd began to drift toward the village. Lyra stayed behind with Jack. They stood together in the fading sunlight. The field empty but still buzzing with the echoes of the game. "You played well," Jack said, "and you didn't even need me to stand by." Lyra's smile softened. "I still needed you, just not the same way as before." Jack tilted his head. "What way now?" She glanced at the field, then back at him as a teammate. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pouch. He handed it to her. Inside was a thin chain with a small metal charm, a miniature version of the ceremonial pattern on her leg. "It's yours," he said, "in case the leg ever gets replaced. You'll still have a piece of it, a reminder that you can stand." Her claws closed around the charm, her throat tight. "I don't plan on forgetting," she said. As they walked back toward the village, Karvik still lingered in the shadows near the fence. His eyes followed them, calculating. He had lost control of her for now. But Jack could feel the weight of the man's stare. This wasn't over, but for tonight, it didn't matter. Tonight, the girl who had once been the lonely watcher was the champion of the field. Her first step had turned into a run, her run into a victory. And somewhere in her heart, she knew the real game had only just begun.